Okay, so welcome back. Today we are going to show you how to do what you see here, which is generate files in your C# Visual Studio Windows Forms application. And the names of those files include what's called a timestamp that tell you exactly what date and time those files were generated. So why would you need to use something like this? Well, in the science, engineering, software development world, often you are monitoring things, you are measuring data in real time, or in software you are developing an application and you want to be notified when an event occurs, and you may want to save data associated with that event that tells you status of different variables. And in the engineering science world, you might be monitoring something in the real world and you want to know when the values go outside a certain range, when an event occurs, and you want to save data associated with that. And we've talked about that many times on this channel. And what this allows you to do is to, if you're going to save that data, you can do what you see here, which is add a date and time stamp to the name, which very quickly tells you when that occurred. And then you can open up that file and get the data associated with that event. Now, there's other options, of course. You can take that date and time stamp and put it inside the file. Of course, then you have to have your software grab that data and parse it and deal with that extra information in your file. So it depends on you how you want to do this, but we're going to show you a technique that allows you to generate a timestamp for an event and add it to the name of the file, or you can even put it inside the file. Now, as you can see here, we've got 3 files. Each has a separate timestamp. And another nice thing about this is you can generate unique files that are associated exactly with an event. And you can see these have the same date but different times. Now, one of the things that can cause some trouble when you're saving files with a timestamp file name is Windows has some what are called reserved characters that you cannot use in your file names. So normally, if you're going to specify a time, like an hour, minutes, and seconds, generally what people do is they have a colon to separate the hours, minutes, and seconds. Unfortunately, Windows won't accept the colon as a file name or a path name. So what we're going to do is show how you can find out what are the acceptable characters if you're going to use a timestamp as a file name. Find out what those are so you know which characters you can use in your file name. So now let's take a look at a very simple application we're going to develop that allows us to save these as a file name and also to find out what are the acceptable characters. So here's a simple C# Visual Studio Windows Forms application. Very simple. It's got a text box and a few buttons, and that's about it. Now the Start button will start to save data to a file that is timestamped, and Stopped will stop the saving of the data and then exit. And in this text box, we have some feedback where we have in our code gone out and asked Windows, hey, what are the reserved characters that we cannot use either in the path to describe the path to a file or the file name itself. And we've printed those out with their hex values. So now we can look at this and get a pretty good idea on what characters we can and cannot use in our file name. So part of this application is going to show you how to do that. So let's take a look at our C# Visual Studio Windows Forms application and see how we can develop this. So here is our simple form. Again, we drag and dropped a text box and then 3 buttons and then double clicked on each button to get the event handlers. We've also added a timer, drag and drop the timer. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow us to generate a time step where we can calculate, in our case, we're just going to calculate a simple sine wave and save that to the text file. So we double click on that and we get an event handler. We should have 4 event handlers and then our simple application. So first thing, we're going to look at the parameters. We're going to have our time step, which is a function of that timer. And we're going to define a file directory string, which tells us what is the path to the folder where these files are going to be stored. And then we're going to have a string we're going to call the file path, which is the complete path, including the file name. So very simple parameters. We're going to have an initialized component. And then we're going to develop this method where we can print in that text box, go out and ask Windows, what are the invalid characters we can't use, and print that. So I've got a method here called print invalid characters we're going to take a look at. And then we've got three event handlers, the start button, the stop button, the exit button, and then this timer that goes through and calculates the data and saves it to the file. So the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to print out those invalid characters. And this is the code that we can use. Again, you don't need this, but it's nice to know that you can go out and ask Windows what the invalid characters are. And what we're going to do is we're going to define two character arrays, one called invalid path characters, which is the path to the folder that these files are going to be in, and then the invalid file characters, which is the invalid characters for a file name. And we're going to use the systemio.path class and the getInvalidPath characters, and that will return a bunch of characters into a character array. Same thing for invalid file name characters, right? Now keep in mind, some of these characters might be control characters, which are not printable. You can't use those. So we really don't care about the control characters. We just want the printable characters. So what we're going to do, text box 1, append text, invalid path, file name characters, and we're going to start out with the path characters that are invalid. At this point, we have gone out and gotten character arrays of path characters and file characters that are invalid. So now we're going to print them out into the text box. So for each character, CH in the invalid path characters, if it is a control character, if system char structure is control, then we don't care about it, we're just going to ignore it. So if it's not a control character, that is control is false, then we will print it out. And what we're going to do is use this text box 1 append text string.format. We're going to have a tab character, and then we are going to print out this C8, the character, and then we're going to tab and print it out in hex format. So 0 is going to be a character, and then tab, and then 1, we're going to cast that to an integer and print it out as a 4-digit hex character. So that's just for the invalid path characters. We're going to do exactly the same for the invalid file name characters. If it's a control character is false, so it's not a control character, we're going to do the exact same thing and print out the character and its hex equivalent. So that's how we get the list of invalid characters. Now, the first thing that's going to happen, of course, we're going to hit the start button, and there's a couple ways we can use to generate a string with a timestamp for the file name. So this first one is the more compact, but a little bit more difficult to understand, where we're going to say the string file time, which is the time that this is generated. We're going to do a string.format, and we're going to use these formatted date time now values, and we're going to say month dash day space hours dash minutes dash seconds. And keep in mind that we can't use colons here because they're not allowed. So this is the formatted structure of a date time now. The alternative that's a little bit messier but a little bit easier to understand is the file time is datetime.now.month toString, and we're using a D2 for 2 places. And then we've got a datetime now.day toString, and then add a space after that, and then hour, minute, and seconds. So to come up with a file name, you just use the datetime now and parse out whatever you want, and that will give you a string with the file name as a timestamp. And then what we can do is we can say the entire path, which is the file directory, which we've defined up here, plus this file time, which is the timestamp, and then we're going to add a .csv to the end. And then this is a start button, so we've got the time to generate the file, and then we're going to enable the timer, and give some feedback that, okay, now we're saving to the file path that we've just determined. And then button stop just disables the timer. So now we've got this all set up, and now what we have to do is have the timer do the calculation and save the value. So we're going to define a sine value. We're just going to do a math.sine, math.pi times time step, or whatever you want to do. And then we're going to use a stream writer called outFile as a new stream writer, and we're going to use that file path and say true because we want to append that file. And then using that stream writer, we're going to do a .write line to write the latest value, this calculated sine value. We're going to first put the time step to string as an F2 with a comma, and then the sine value to string as an F2, and then increment the time step. So basically each time step is going to save a line into the file and then go on to the next one. So that's about it for saving a file with a timestamp. Very simple. You got a couple ways to do it using the date, time, now structure. So that's it for saving timestamp file names. If you like any of these videos, I encourage you to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell notifications. But most of all, please let others know that we're here so we get some views. Really appreciate it. Otherwise, take care. Have a really good day. Thanks.